HOA. Karen booked my lake mansion for 80 guests. Without even asking me, she turned my home into her private resort. Music on the patio, strangers on my dock, coolers stacked on my steps, and when I confronted her, she smiled and told me I was the intruder. But what she didn't know was that her little party would cost her everything. Because in the end, I sued the HOA, and I walked away with $250,000. How did it happen, and how did one woman's arrogance destroy an entire board? Stay with me, because this story is darker, pettier, and far more expensive than you think. Welcome back to the HOA Society, the home of the wildest HOA stories in America. My name is Daniel. I'm a homeowner living on the edge of a quiet lake community in the Midwest. I bought my dream mansion here, hoping for peace and calm, but peace is the last thing you find when your neighborhood is ruled by Karen and her HOA board. This is the story of the day my home was stolen for a party, and how I turned the tables and took back more than just my house. The mansion by the lake was supposed to be my dream. I had worked for years, saved every dollar, chased every deal, just to stand on that patio and look out over the water. It was supposed to be peace. It was supposed to be mine. But peace is never safe. Not when you live under an HOA, and especially not when the one holding the clipboard is Karen. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was the queen of the board. She believed her word was the law. She believed the lake was hers. And on that hot summer weekend, she decided my mansion was hers too. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. At first I thought it was spam, some telemarketer. But when I picked up, it was my neighbor David. His voice was low, nervous. "Hey, Daniel, do you know there's like 50 cars outside your place?" A heart sank. I slipped on my shoes and walked to the window, and there it was. A line of cars all down the street, SUVs, minivans, even a party bus, all parked by my mansion, all parked like they owned the road. I drove down the hill, and what I saw still burns in my mind. Strangers everywhere, tables dragged across my patio, coolers stacked by my steps, music blaring across the water, kids splashing at my dock like it was a public pool, and at the center of it all was Karen. She wore a bright pink dress, sunglasses that covered half her face, and in her hand, the clipboard, the same clipboard she used to hand out fines for lawns too tall, the same clipboard she used to measure the height of mailboxes. She waved it in the air like a queen holding a scepter. Her voice carried across the crowd. "Welcome, everyone. The mansion is ready for you. Enjoy the event." The mansion was ready. For them, not for me. I stepped out of my car and shouted, "What is this? Who are these people?" Some of them looked guilty. Others laughed. But Karen, she didn't flinch. She walked toward me with that smile, the one that never touched her eyes. "Daniel, you weren't here, so the board reserved your house for a community event." I blinked. I actually thought I had misheard. "My house," I said. "Reserved," she repeated, "for the HOA guests." I laughed, a dry laugh that even scared me. "You reserved my house without asking me." Karen tilted her head. "The board voted. It was unanimous. And besides, it's for the community." Behind her, music grew louder. I saw strangers spilling drinks on my steps. I saw kids throwing chips into the lake. I saw people walking through my home like it was a hotel lobby. My blood boiled, but my voice broke. "This is my property." Karen leaned closer and whispered so only I could hear. "Not today. Not when the board says otherwise." That whisper, it was like a knife. The arrogance, the control, the belief that she owned me. It made my hands shake. I shouted again, louder this time. "This is trespassing. Get out of my house." But Karen raised her clipboard, and with one stroke of her pen, she wrote something down. She smiled. "You've just been fined for disturbing the peace." The crowd laughed, some clapped, and me, I stood there, the owner of the mansion, powerless. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on my couch, lights off, staring at the wall. the sound of the party still echoing in my ears, the music, the laughter. Karen's voice calling the shots in my own home. Every fiber of me wanted to explode, to shout, to tear down her power. But then a thought struck me. What if I didn't shout? What if I used her own rules against her? The next morning, I started my plan. I took pictures of everything, the mess they left behind, the bottles by my dock, the stains on my steps, the trash stuffed in my bushes, and I wrote everything down, every single detail. How many cars, how many guests, how long they stayed, what damages they caused, every rule broken by Karen herself. For once, the clipboard was mine. But Karen didn't stop. She sent me letters every day, violation notices, demands for extra HOA fees, threats of legal action if I didn't comply with the community rules. Every letter was colder than the last. She wanted to break me. She wanted to show everyone that fighting her was useless, but I smiled because every letter she sent was another weapon for me to use. Every threat she made was another nail in her coffin. I met with a lawyer, a sharp man with sharper eyes. I laid the stack of letters on his desk. I showed him the pictures, the list, the damages. He leaned back in his chair and laughed. This isn't just trespassing. This is theft. This is abuse of power. He looked me dead in the eye. Daniel, you're not losing here. You're about to win. For the first time, I felt hope. For the first time, I believed Karen's power could crack. And for the first time, I imagined justice. The days that followed were tense. Karen grew bolder. She strutted down the street like nothing could touch her. Neighbors whispered behind curtains. Some feared her. Others hated her. But no one dared to stand against her. No one except me. And as the case built, as my lawyer prepared, as the evidence stacked higher and higher, I realized something chilling. Karen didn't just want my house for one day. She wanted to control me forever. She wanted to prove that no matter what, the HOA owned me. I thought the worst was over after that first night. But I was wrong. Because when Karen feels power slipping through her fingers, she doesn't back down. She doubles down the morning after the party. I walked outside with a trash bag in my hand. The patio was a battlefield. Red cups crushed on the stone steps, cigarette butts floating by the dock, sticky pink punch spilled across my table, and someone had carved their initials into the wood railing of my deck. It wasn't just a mess. It was disrespect. I bent down to pick up a bottle. And that's when I saw her. Karen standing on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand. Watching me clean. She didn't say a word at first. She just smiled that cold smile. And then, Daniel, you really should have mowed your lawn yesterday. I'll have to fine you for that. I froze. The lawn. The same lawn she had trampled with 80 strangers. The same lawn buried under paper plates and napkins. She fined me for it. I wanted to scream, but instead, I took out my phone and snapped a picture of her. Clipboard raised like a weapon. Her smile faltered for a second. Maybe she realized I was no longer the quiet man who just took her orders. Later that day, a letter came in the mail. Another violation. This time for unauthorized gatherings. Yes, gatherings. She claimed I had hosted the party. She claimed the mansion was used by me to break HOA rules. I almost laughed when I read it. Almost. But the truth is, my hands shook because her power was real. And her reach was long. I called my lawyer again. I showed him the letter. He chuckled and leaned back. Let her write. The more she puts on paper, the more rope she gives us to hang her case. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But when the neighbors started to whisper, I wasn't so sure. At the corner of the street, I overheard two of them talking. Daniel's mansion was packed. He must be throwing these parties all the time. He's rich. He'll get away with it. The story twisted, the truth bent, and Karen fed it with every word she spread. I realized then, this wasn't just about a party. This was war. A war for reputation. A war for control. So I played her game. I followed every single rule. I measured my mailbox. I trimmed my hedges exactly 3 inches from the sidewalk. I repainted my fence the approved shade of beige. I became the model citizen of the HOA, the one they could never fine, the one they could never touch. But even then, Karen tried. A note appeared on my door one morning. In bold letters it read, "You are being watched." No signature. But I knew. It was her. The handwriting. The style. The petty threat. She wanted me scared. She wanted me small. But I wasn't scared. I was collecting. Every note, every letter, every violation, all of it went into a file. And that file grew thick, so thick that even my lawyer whistled when he saw it. Weeks passed, and Karen grew restless. The neighborhood pool committee met on a Saturday. I wasn't supposed to attend, but I showed up anyway. Karen stood at the front, clipboard in hand. She listed new rules, new fines, new fees. And when a neighbor timidly raised a hand and asked if the HOA could lower costs, Karen snapped, "If you don't like it, leave." The room went silent. Every eye darted around. No one dared to speak. No one but me. I stood up. My house was used for an illegal party, and instead of apologizing, you fined me for it. The crowd gasped. Karen's face flushed red, but she smirked again. "You're spreading lies, Daniel. We all know you hoes. Ted that party yourself." The neighbors looked at me, some with doubt, some with pity, and in that moment, I realized what Karen feared most, the truth. Because if the truth came out, her throne would crumble. I left the meeting without another word, but inside, the fire burned hotter than ever. I was done being polite. I was done being the quiet lakefront homeowner. It was time to end this. My lawyer filed the lawsuit the next Monday. Trespassing, property damage, defamation, harassment. The stack of evidence was taller than Karen's clipboard, and for once, I had the power. But Karen wasn't finished. No. She knocked on my door that very night. When I opened it, she stood there smiling. Her perfume was strong, almost suffocating. And in that same pink dress she had worn the day of the party, she leaned against my doorframe. "You really don't want to do this, Daniel. The HOA can make your life very difficult." I stared at her, at the arrogance, at the confidence, at the belief that she could ruin me with a pen, and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I leaned closer and whispered back, "You already have." Her smile broke, for just a second. The mask slipped, and I saw the fear in her eyes. The court date was set, from that day on. The neighborhood buzzed like a hive. Some neighbors avoided me, some whispered support, some slipped me quiet notes saying they were tired of her too, and every time Karen walked by with her clipboard, I smiled, because she had no idea what was coming. The morning of the hearing felt unreal. The air was heavy, like the lake itself was holding its breath. I put on my best suit, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted Karen to know that this time I was ready. My lawyer met me outside the courthouse. He carried a thick folder under his arm, the same folder filled with every picture, every note, every violation letter. He smiled. "Don't worry, Daniel. You've already won. She just doesn't know it yet." Inside the courtroom, the tension was sharp. The neighbors had come too. Some sat in the back row whispering, some curious, some nervous. And then she walked in. Karen, her heels clicked against the floor. Every step a declaration. She wore another bright pink dress, her hair perfectly styled, sunglasses perched on her head, even though we were indoors. And of course, the clipboard. She clutched it like a shield, like proof of her power. She saw me sitting there and smiled. But for the first time, I wasn't scared. I smiled back. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The bailiff called the case. And just like that, it was me against Karen. Her lawyer spoke first. He painted me as arrogant, selfish, a man who thought he was above the community. He said I had hosted a massive gathering, ignored HOA rules, and now was wasting the court's time with wild accusations. Every word dripped with confidence. Every sentence was rehearsed. Karen nodded proudly beside him, as if the victory was already hers. But then, it was my turn. My lawyer stood and began. "Your Honor, this is not about a party. This is about abuse of power." He laid the pictures on the desk one by one. The mess, the damage, the strangers on my dock, the coolers stacked on my steps, and then the violation letters, dozens of them. stacked so high the judge raised an eyebrow. The courtroom whispered. Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her smile trembled. Then came the moment that silenced the room. The video. My neighbor David had filmed the party from his porch. The crowd. The music. Karen herself leading the event. The screen flickered as the judge watched, and there it was. Karen, clipboard in hand, announcing the community event from my patio. The judge leaned back, arms crossed. Karen's lawyer coughed, shuffled his papers, tried to object. But it was too late. The truth was on the screen. Karen was called to the stand. Her confidence cracked the moment she sat down. The judge asked, "Did you all authorize this event?" Karen stammered. "The board. We voted. It was for the good of the neighborhood." The judge pressed. "Did you have permission from the homeowner?" Karen's lips tightened. Her voice lowered. "No." That single word echoed through the room. No, she never had permission. She never had authority. My lawyer leaned in with the final blow. "And yet, you fined Daniel for disturbing the peace at his own property." Karen swallowed hard, but couldn't answer. The neighbors stared, some shocked, some secretly smiling, because at last, the queen of the clipboard was cornered. The judge didn't waste much time. "Karen, this isn't leadership. This is trespassing, harassment, and abuse of power." His gavel hit the desk. "The HOA is liable for damages in the amount of $250,000. The sound rang like thunder. Karen's face turned pale. Her lawyer dropped his pen. The room erupted in whispers. $250,000 from a single party, from a single act of arrogance. I sat there in silence, letting it sink in. For months she had tried to break me. For months she had turned neighbors against me. For months she had smiled while she wrote fines on her clipboard. And now, she was the one who had to pay. But it wasn't just money. It was the look in her eyes. For the first time, Karen wasn't smiling. For the first time, she looked small. After court, I walked outside and breathed in the air. It felt lighter, freer. My lawyer clapped me on the back. "Told you." She gave us all the rope we needed. The neighbors trickled out behind me. Some nodded in respect. Some even whispered apologies. They had believed her lies, but now they knew the truth. Karen left last. Her head was down. Her clipboard clutched to her chest. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. And in that silence, I knew her reign was over. But the victory wasn't just mine. It was for every neighbor who had been too afraid to speak. Every homeowner who had paid her unfair fines. Every family who had lived under her shadow. The HOA's throne had cracked. And Karen's crown had fallen. That night I returned to my mansion by the lake. The water was calm. The patio clean. The air filled only with the sound of crickets. I sat on the steps with a coffee in hand, and for the first time in months, I felt peace, real peace. But peace doesn't last forever in an HOA. Because while Karen had lost, power never disappears. It shifts. It waits. It hides behind another smile. And in neighborhoods like mine, power always comes back with a new face, a new plan, a new clipboard. The courtroom victory felt like a storm had passed. But storms always leave debris behind. And in my neighborhood, the debris had a name, Karen. Word spread faster than fire. By the next morning, everyone knew the HOA had been sued, the HOA had lost, and Karen, the queen with her clipboard, had been dethroned. But defeat didn't stop her from walking the streets. No, she still strutted past my mansion with her head high, pretending nothing had changed. She still carried that clipboard. Though now it shook a little in her hands, she still wore her bright pink dresses. But her smile no longer fooled anyone. The neighbors whispered when she passed. Some turned away, some stared with thin grins, as if finally tasting revenge without lifting a finger. But Karen, she lived in denial. She pretended the crown was still on her head, even as it slipped to the ground. One evening, I walked to the mailbox. Karen stood across the street. Her sunglasses hid her eyes. But I felt her stare burning through me. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, watching. And for a moment, I realized the lawsuit may have ended, but her war wasn't over. A week later, the HOA called a special meeting. I didn't want to go, but curiosity pulled me in. The clubhouse was packed. Neighbors filled every chair. Some standing against the wall. The tension was heavy, like everyone was waiting for the next crack of thunder. Karen sat at the front, her clipboard rested on the table, like a broken sword, and beside her sat the rest of the board, pale, nervous, defeated. One of the neighbors spoke up. $250,000. How are we going to pay it? The room erupted, voices shouting, hands waving, blame flying like sparks. Karen raised her hand to calm the crowd, but this time, no one listened. Another neighbor stood. Why should we pay for your mistake, Karen? Her voice cut like a knife. For the first time, Karen flinched. Her mouth opened, but no words came. It was chaos. The board tried to speak, but every sentence was drowned by angry voices. Resign, someone shouted. Step down, another yelled. The chant grew louder. Resign, resign. Karen's face turned red. Her hands gripped the clipboard so tight I thought it might snap, but still, she refused to let go. Finally, a man in the back spoke. His voice was calm, steady, but strong enough to silence the room. Karen, this neighborhood is not your kingdom. It's our homes, our lives, and you've cost us too much. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Karen stood, trembling, and stormed out of the room. Her heels clicked fast, each step like a retreating drumbeat. The neighbors cheered for the first time in years. The board wasn't in control. The people were. But even victory has shadows, because lawsuits don't just break queens, they break treasuries. And the HOA's bank account was bleeding. Rumors spread. Special assessments. Higher fees. Possible bankruptcy. The same people who cheered now whispered about money, and once again, all eyes turned toward me. Daniel sued them. Daniel caused this. I heard it in the grocery store. I heard it at the gas station. I even heard it from kids playing by the lake. My victory had freed the neighborhood from Karen, but it had also chained me to their anger. One afternoon, David, the same neighbor who had first called me about the pedo, stopped by my house. He looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet. Listen, Daniel, some of the neighbors, they think you went too far. I raised an eyebrow. Too far, she threw a party in my house. I know, he whispered, but $250,000. People are scared. I sighed, because he wasn't wrong. The HOA was crumbling, and fear spreads faster than truth. And Karen, even in defeat, used that fear like fuel. She started whispering to her loyal friends, spinning her story. She was protecting the neighborhood. She was making sure rules were followed. She was punished for caring too much. And slowly, unbelievably, some began to nod. It was surreal, like watching the villain of a movie step back onto the stage after the credits. She had lost the battle, but she was rewriting the script. Meanwhile, my mansion became a symbol. Some saw it as justice, proof that the HOA could be beaten. Others saw it as the reason their fees were rising, the reason their board was collapsing. And me, I sat on my patio every night, staring at the lake, wondering if peace was even possible here. But then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived in my mailbox, not from Karen, not from the HOA, but from a group of neighbors who signed their names proudly at the bottom. It read, Daniel, thank you. You stood up when we couldn't. You showed us that no one is above the law. We want you to know, you're not alone. I read it twice, 3 times, and for the first time, I felt the weight lift a little. Maybe not everyone hated me, maybe, just maybe. Karen's shadow was finally fading. Still, I couldn't ignore the truth. She was still out there, still walking the streets with her broken clipboard, still smiling her broken smile, still whispering in the ears of those who wanted to believe her lies. And I knew, deep down, that her story wasn't over, because people like Karen don't disappear. They wait, they plot, they find new ways to claw back power. I thought the storm had passed after the court ruling. But storms in HOA neighborhoods never really pass. They just circle back, darker, stronger, waiting for the next strike. Karen may have lost the battle, but she hadn't lost her hunger for control. And when people like Karen lose power, they don't surrender, they scheme. It started small. A note slipped under my door. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was hers. "You don't belong here." I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash, but more came, every week. Another note, sometimes folded tight, sometimes scrawled across plain paper, always the same message. "Leave. You're not one of us. This is our neighborhood." At first I ignored them, but then the whispers began again, at the gas station, at the grocery store, even at the mailbox. Daniel is trouble. Daniel ruined the HOA. Daniel cost us all money. The truth was twisted again, and I could see Karen's fingerprints all over it. One evening, as I was walking back from the dock, I saw her, standing by the road with two of her closest allies. They weren't laughing. They weren't smiling. They were staring at me, like wolves watching their prey. When I stepped closer, Karen tilted her head. "You may have won in court, but you won't win here." I didn't answer. I just walked inside. But that night, I couldn't sleep, because her words echoed in my mind. "You won't win here." The next week, the HOA board held another meeting. This time, Karen wasn't at the front. She sat in the back, arms crossed, clipboard gone. But her allies spoke for her. They pushed for new rules, harsher restrictions, stricter fines, and though the board looked broken, tired, embarrassed, they nodded. Karen didn't need the title anymore. She had something stronger, fear. Soon after, I found another letter in my mailbox. This one wasn't from her. It was official, stamped with the HOA logo, a violation for leaving unauthorized items on my patio. I looked around. The only thing on my patio was a chair and a coffee cup. I laughed, but inside I knew this was her hand again. The violations kept coming. Noise complaints when no music played, parking fines when my car was in my own driveway, lawn not trimmed evenly, mailbox paint fading. Petty, absurd, but endless. It was death by paper cuts. My lawyer told me we could fight again, but lawsuits take time, and money, and energy, and that's exactly what Karen wanted. She couldn't win in court, so she tried to bury me in stress, but I wasn't alone. Remember that letter my neighbors had sent me? The one with their signatures. They came back, one by one, quiet at first, then louder. They spoke against her at meetings. They whispered truth when she spread lies. And slowly, her power cracked again. But cracks don't break right away, because Karen fought harder. One night, I came home to find eggs thrown at my garage. Another night, someone had spray-painted the word traitor on my mailbox. The police came. They took pictures. They made notes. But no one was arrested. No proof. No cameras. No witnesses. But I knew who was behind it. And when I walked past Karen's house the next morning, she was watering her flowers, humming, smiling, like nothing had happened. But her eyes followed me. And I felt the chill in my bones. The neighborhood was divided. Some stood with me, some stood with her. Most just hid behind curtains, too scared to pick a side. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about property anymore. It wasn't just about a mansion or a lawsuit. It was psychological warfare. Karen didn't want money. She didn't even want power anymore. She wanted to break me from the inside out. But here's the irony. The more she tried, the stronger I became. Because every egg, every spray-painted word, every violation letter, it all went into my file. The same file that had already cost her $250,000. And I smiled to myself. Because I knew, if she pushed too far again, the next storm would wash her away completely. Still, the war wasn't over. I saw it in her eyes every time she passed my house. The fire was still there, the hatred still burned, and I knew, sooner or later, she would make her move again. The nights grew longer after the revenge began. I could feel it in the air, the tension, the waiting. Every time I closed my eyes, I wondered what Karen would try next, because people like her, they don't stop, they simmer, they plan, they strike when you least expect it. It happened on a Friday evening. I came home from work, tired, just wanting to sit by the lake. But when I opened the door, I froze. The smell hit me first. Rotten food, something sour, sharp, unbearable. I followed the smell through the hallway, to the living room, and there it was. Trash, bags of garbage dumped all over my carpet, banana peels, spoiled meat, half-eaten food crawling with flies. I stood there in shock. Someone had broken into my house. My first thought was robbery, but nothing was taken. My TV was still there. My laptop sat on the counter. The safe was untouched. No, this wasn't about stealing. This was about breaking me. The police came. They asked questions. They dusted for prints, but the officer looked at me with tired eyes. Could be kids messing around. Could be anyone. I shook my head, but deep down, I knew. This wasn't kids. This was Karen. I cleaned the mess, scrubbed the carpets until my hands ached, but the smell lingered, just like the hatred. And as I threw the last bag into the dumpster, I made a promise to myself. If she wanted war, she was going to get it. The next HOA meeting came sooner than expected. The room buzzed with whispers when I walked in. Karen sat in the back again, pretending she was only an observer now, but her eyes never left me. The board tried to discuss pool maintenance, landscaping contracts, budgets, but the neighbors didn't care about that anymore. They cared about the war. They wanted answers. And voices rose against Karen. You cost us money. You divided the neighborhood. You made us a joke, Karen snapped back. You think Daniel cares about you? He only cares about himself. He sued us because his ego couldn't take losing. The room erupted again, and that's when I stood up. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. I sued because my house was stolen, because 80 strangers partied in my mansion while the HOA president smiled. I sued because rules don't mean one person gets to play queen. Silence. Every eye turned to me. Every head shifted from Karen to me. And for the first time, I felt the weight shift. The room wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. Karen's face flushed red. She tried to speak, but no words came. And one by one, neighbors stood up. Not all of them, but enough. Daniel's right, someone said. We're tired of this, another added. And the chant began again. Step down! Step down! Karen grabbed her purse and stormed out. The door slammed behind her, and for a moment, I thought it was finally over. But I was wrong. The following week, the HOA mailbox was broken into, letters stolen, checks missing, and guess whose name was whispered through the neighborhood? Mine. Daniel wants to destroy the HOA. Daniel is sabotaging us. Daniel won't stop until we're ruined. I heard it over and over, and it didn't take long before another violation arrived in my mailbox. This one wasn't about my lawn or my car. This one accused me of tampering with HOA property. It was bold. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of move Karen would make when cornered. My lawyer told me to relax. We'll add it to the pile. If she pushes, she'll bury herself again. But I wasn't calm, because this wasn't just paper anymore. This was my reputation. This was my safety. And then, the twist I never saw coming. One night, I looked out my window and saw flashing lights. Police cars lined the street. Neighbors stood outside whispering. And at the center of it all was Karen's house. She had been arrested, not because of me, not because of the lawsuit, but because she had been caught using HOA funds for personal expenses, luxury shopping, vacations, even a brand new car, all with HOA money. The neighborhood buzzed like bees, some in shock, some in joy, some just relieved. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant with a clipboard anymore. She was a criminal. I stood by the window watching as they led her away in handcuffs. Her pink dress glowed under the flashing red and blue lights. Her head was down, her face pale, her clipboard nowhere in sight. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel hate. I felt pity, because beneath all the power trips and fines and parties, Karen was just a desperate woman clinging to control she never really had. The next morning, the neighborhood was quiet. No notes on doors, no fines in mailboxes, no whispers in the clubhouse. It was silence, and it felt like freedom. But freedom has a price. The HOA was broken. The funds were gone. The trust was shattered. And even though Karen was gone, the scars she left remained. I sat on my patio that night, watching the lake shimmer under the moonlight. For the first time in months, there were no strangers on my dock, no laughter echoing across the water, just silence and peace. But as I sipped my coffee, a thought struck me. Karen may be gone, but what about the next one? Because in every neighborhood, there's always another clipboard waiting to rise, another power-hungry neighbor ready to take her place. The night Karen was taken away in handcuffs should have been the end. The final chapter, the last page in a book that had been too heavy to carry. But endings in neighborhoods like mine, they never come clean. They come jagged, messy, and they leave scars that remind you every day what you survived. The next morning, I walked to my dock with a cup of coffee in hand. The lake was still, calm, almost pretending nothing had happened, but the neighborhood wall is different. Shutters closed, curtains drawn, people whispered instead of waved. The HOA board was silent too, the president's chair empty, the treasurer's hands shaking. The secretary too nervous to speak above a whisper. They looked broken, and for the first time, powerless. But here's the irony. Even in her absence, Karen still ruled, her shadow lingered, her voice echoed in every meeting, her name dripped from every whisper. Some people missed her control, others cursed her for the mess, and many just wished she had never existed at all. Me. I felt something strange. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't fear. It was emptiness. Because when you fight a monster for so long, and the monster is gone, you almost forget what peace feels like. I tried to settle back into normal life, mowing my lawn, sitting on my patio, fishing by the dock. But normal had changed. Neighbors who once smiled at me now avoided my eyes. They blamed me for exposing Karen, for suing the HOA, for making their fees rise because the funds had been drained, even though Karen had stolen from them, twisted the rules, destroyed the board. It was easier to blame me because I was still here. One afternoon, I found an envelope taped to my door. It wasn't a violation letter. It wasn't a threat. It was an offer. A realtor's card slipped inside, and 3 words written in black ink. Sell. And leave. No signature. But I didn't need one. The handwriting wasn't Karen's. It was my neighbor's. That cut deeper than any note she ever wrote. Because this wasn't just her war anymore. It had spread. The infection had moved from one queen into the people themselves. I sat on my couch that night, staring at the envelope. The offer was tempting. I could leave. I could take my settlement money. I could buy another house far from HOA meetings and clipboards. I could start over. But then I looked around my mansion, the windows I had installed myself, the fireplace I had built with my own hands, the view of the lake that no money could replace. And a thought whispered in my mind, why should I leave? Why should I give up what's mine? Because of their pettiness, why should I surrender after I already won? So I stayed, but staying came with a price. The months that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. Every meeting felt like a funeral. Every vote dragged like a trial. The board tried to rebuild. But without trust, it was like stacking stones on sand. They replaced Karen with a new president, a man named Steve. He was softer, calmer, desperate to please everyone, but he lacked her fire. And because of that, no one respected him. The HOA became a ghost of itself. Rules ignored, fines unpaid. The once feared clipboard now just a piece of paper no one cared about. Some neighbors celebrated, others panicked, and me. I watched it crumble with a strange mix of satisfaction and dread, because I knew when order dies, chaos takes its place. And chaos came. Lawns grew wild, trash bins sat out for days, cars parked anywhere they pleased. The neighborhood that once looked perfect from the outside now looked like it was falling apart. And the irony, the bitter irony, was that Karen would have smiled if she saw it, because deep down, chaos proved her right, that without control, the neighborhood couldn't survive. But maybe that's the truth about suburbia. It's all an illusion, the perfect lawns, the white fences, the matching mailboxes. It's a stage, and behind the curtain, it's just people, petty, greedy, fearful, desperate people. People who fight for crowns made of paper, people who build kingdoms out of concrete driveways and front porches. And me. I was caught in the middle of it all, the man with the mansion by the lake, the man who sued and won, the man who carried both victory and blame. Sometimes at night, I wonder what would have happened if I had walked away, if I had ignored the party, if I had let Karen steal a day from my life and kept quiet. Would things be better? Would the neighborhood still be intact? Would my name still be clean? Or would it all have crumbled anyway? Just slower. I don't have the answer. But I do know this. When you live in an HOA, there are no winners, only survivors. The lake still shines at sunset, the mansion still stands, and I still drink my coffee on the patio every morning, but the taste has changed because every sip reminds me of the battle I fought, and the shadows that still linger around me. Karen is gone, but her story lives on in whispers, and sometimes, when the wind carries laughter across the water, I swear I can hear her voice, telling me, this war is never really over, so let me ask you one final time. If you had a mansion by the lake, and you had fought the HOA and won $250,000, but the neighborhood itself turned against you, would you hold your ground and defend your dream home? Or would you walk away, leave it all behind, and choose peace over pride? Tell me in the comments, because maybe the real mansion isn't the one by the lake. Maybe it's the peace we all keep chasing, even when it costs us everything.